Right. Prime Minister Modi is en route to Canada's Alberta for the G7 summit, not as a member but as the most watched guest. But why is this invite shaking up the world stage? Well, relations between India and Canada were in the deep freeze and have picked up since then. Unchecked Khalistani extremism across Canada under Justin Trudeau's tenure was the primary reason which divided the two countries. But now, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney says India is simply too big to ignore. Carney does have a point. India is now the world's fourth largest economy, fast becoming the world's supply chain lifeline. And most importantly, it's the voice of the global south. So if G7 wants to tackle climate issues, it wants to address how AI needs to be regulated, it wants to have a better roadmap about what should be global security, it needs to have India to ensure that those talks are not just conclusive, but also have some sort of a roadmap, which is why Prime Minister Modi's visit to Canada to attend this G7 summit. Since 2019, he's been attending these, is going to be so important. Let's get in Maha Siddiqui, my colleague who's been tracking the G7 summit for us, joining us live to talk more on this. Maha, good to have you on the show. Talk to us about this G7 summit, the first that's for Prime Minister Modi and Mark Carney's visit. There's a lot of expectations that it could reboot some of the India-Canada relationship that was tested during Trudeau years.
Well, absolutely. That's the hope and the expectation that most people hold, that this meeting will act as an icebreaker. So there is going to be a bilateral between the two leaders on the sidelines of the G7 summit. And we're expecting that some of the issues that have been the cause of friction between the two countries could come up during the bilateral meeting. For instance, the issue of Khalistan, something that India has constantly raised with Canada and asked Canada to show concern to India's issues with regards to the Khalistan separatism, and that not to give a political voice to the separatists here in Canada who are calling for a separate Khalistan in India, and to respect India's sovereignty. These are some of the critical issues that need to be navigated before really there can be an improvement in the ties between India and Canada. So certainly this message is going to be conveyed by the Indian side. On the Canadian side, we hear that they want to raise the issue of crime syndicates as well, intelligence sharing, and they are looking for proper law enforcement coordination between India and Canada, because for them, the issue of the killing of Hardeep Singh Nijjar is something that has been raised by the community here in Canada, and that is something that the Canadian government, which continues to be a liberal government, wants to take up. Though Mark Carney has been pragmatic, Gauri, as you have pointed out, he wants to improve the ties with India, understanding the economic significance of India. He pointed out how it's a big economy, the fourth largest, as well as critical in all supply chains. And that's the reason that India had to be at the high table here at G7 as an invitee country, which it has been since 2019, since the Biarritz summit in France. So Prime Minister Modi lands today in Calgary. He's going to stay in Calgary overnight and then go to Kananaskis for the G7 summit. The outreach session is where the Prime Minister will be speaking, and this will be followed by at least two bilaterals that the Prime Minister will be engaging in.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. And Maha, before I let you go, while there's a lot of expectation, at some level, if this just acts as an icebreaker of a session, that itself could at least ensure it gets the ball rolling, so to say, because a lot may not be achieved today, but it could set that entire thing into motion, isn't it?
That's absolutely right, Gauri, and especially the potential that the relationship between India and Canada can really have as far as trade is concerned. Canada has suffered betrayal from its closest ally, the United States, and it is very keenly now looking at diversifying its trading relationship, trading partnership. For that, it's looking at the Indo-Pacific, and it has an Indo-Pacific strategy from 2022, which had clearly acknowledged the importance of India in the region. To say that the trade between the two countries is below potential would be correct as far as the trade of goods is concerned. It stands at $8.6 billion for India, and India believes that it is far below potential. The service sector has shown a lot of steady supply between the two sides, and something that both sides wanted to be consistent. It's at $14.3 billion for India, And India hopes to be able to leverage that. So all this can only go forward once the relationship and the diplomatic friction that both sides have seen can be set aside. As far as the diplomatic friction is concerned arising out of the Khalistan issue, we know that the diplomats from both countries, the highest level diplomats, that is the high commissioners, were removed from both sides. And therefore, perhaps as a beginning, that is a position that could be reinstated between the two sides to show that they are taking a step forward in the relationship. So there is huge potential. Yes, of course, build on the trade partnership, but that can only happen when issues of this nature are removed.
Right, let's quickly now put it forth the big questions, and we also get in our guest joining us this evening, Terry Maliski, as well as Ambassador Satish Mehta, to understand what this means. Gentlemen, thank you so much for speaking to NDTV. We put out those big questions as well that tell you why this meeting, this summit is so very important. The first big question is that is this a clear message to anti-India elements, Prime Minister Modi at G7? Second question, is this really going to lead to a reboot in the India-Canada ties? And most importantly, what is the kind of meeting or a pull aside that is expected, and what could come out of that when Prime Minister Modi and PM Carney meet on the sidelines? What could be expected? Because at the end of the day, if the leaders strike some sort of a rapport, it could lead to a lot of things being set into motion. Let me start with you, Ambassador Mehta. How do you see this visit? What would be your key expectations from this meeting?
I think the most important thing is that the invitation came. Prime Minister of Canada himself called Indian Prime Minister, and prior to that, Amit Anand and Jaishankar had a long conversation. So I guess things are moving in the right direction. That's how one would read it. And I think Canada is looking at a way out through this, through how they ramp off where they put themselves in. And that's a very good sign. And India has reciprocated by Prime Minister visiting Canada, accepting the invitation for the G7.
Okay. Terry, in terms of one of the things that was cited was how Canada needs India because of its economic recovery plans. How important is that, given the fact that Canada is one of the largest exporters of commodities, and India is one of the largest consumers, importers of commodities and energy?
Well, it's more than important, isn't it? It's actually essential. Mark Carney has introduced himself by saying he's going to revolutionize the economy of Canada. He wants to spend $9 billion more on defense and much else besides. And he's warming up to India as much as he can. They've announced that they will improve their information sharing with respect to law enforcement, terrorism, and the like. We don't have details, but at least it's the right direction. And both prime ministers are sending us all a message that we're going to try to get past this unpleasantness of the last couple of years following the assassination of Hardeep Singh Nijjar in Surrey, British Columbia. Now, since then, though, the bad news is, as you know, that since then, relations have gone into a deep freeze, diplomats kicked out. It couldn't get much worse without going to war. Now that they're both saying they're going to warm things up, that's great. It sets a direction which will be welcome, and they're putting pressure on themselves to deliver on that. Problem is that Mark Carney doesn't have the ability. A Canadian Prime Minister, for example, can't pick up the phone and send all the cops to prison. If they're not doing anything illegal, if they go down the street with a yellow flag saying Khalistan Zindabad. The second problem is that there are charges, a number of Indian origin individuals, for an alleged crime wave, as the Canadian Mounted Police describe it. And the Prime Minister can't stop that either. He can't say, oh, that's diplomatically inconvenient because we want to be friends with India again. The police will go ahead. There's not a lot he can do concretely to make this all go away, but he's setting the right direction.
So what you're saying is that it will challenge Canadian desires to act on India's legit grievances and also challenge its capacity to actually act on some of this. Ambassador Mehta, let me ask you this. The fact that there are serious security concerns right now that have been raised by India with regard to some of the threats that Prime Minister Modi faces there, that also tells you the kind of Khalistani extremism that actually exists on Canadian soil. How much do you think Mark Carney would be able to address this?
The previous government, the Trudeau government, was hand in glove with these crazy guys. That was the fact of the matter. Secondly, it was dependent upon NDP led by Jagmeet Singh, who himself is a known Khalistani. Now, Jagmeet Singh is out of the equation. The fact that he himself lost the election shows what his standing is and how Canadians see him. The second part is Trudeau himself is out of the equation now. So, in that sense, lots of things have already been rebooted by the Canadian voters. Rest of it is for two governments to work it out. Now, as to the fact of what Terry mentioned about government not being able to influence the courts, I think no evidence has been given. India has asked for evidence, and no evidence was ever given.
Okay.
So I think the conversations will have to be more on intelligence sharing, security aspects.
Yes.
And India's concerns are genuine. And these people who want Khalistan are Canadian passport holders.
Indeed.
Imagine what business do they have to break up India, and why should that tolerate that? Now, imagine if Indians were sitting here in India with Indian passport holders trying to fan in the Quebec breakup program. This would be completely unacceptable to Canada, as it is, as the Khalistani movement is to India.
Okay.
So I think, and Canada must get this message very clearly. See, if you have friends, then you don't meddle with the internal
Absolutely.
politics.
And I think that's the most important thing. Terry, let me ask you this then.
And just one last point.
Yes, sir. Quickly, please. Yeah.
Often it's said that, the democratic impulses, that they have vote banks. No, you've seen this election. Before that, Stephen Harper was Prime Minister for 4 terms.
Yes.
All these folks were there, and they have no credence. So they get credibility because politicians line up with them,
right.
Not otherwise. I think that's the message that Mr. Carney must understand.
Absolutely, that's exactly what he must understand. So, in the spirit of keeping it concise, I want to quickly get in Terry's view on the fact that how much do you think, if at all, a pull aside takes place between Prime Minister Modi and Mark Carney, that could thaw relations simply because the leaders would be able to build some sort of a rapport and set the ball rolling, so to say? Terry?
Look, Mark Carney and Narendra Modi are two men who want to talk business. They are not interested in wasting time. They're men of power, and they want a better trading relationship. They know how governments. Look, there's probably not a finance minister in the world who doesn't already know Mark Carney from his many years as a central banker. The issue now is how much power does he really have to change things? We know that business right now is behind Mark Carney. They're hoping for a better relationship on an urgent basis. And I want to mention one other thing. The Khalistani element is not having much impact now. The Khalistani element, they've got a demonstration. They've been allowed to have a demonstration about an hour away from Kananaskis. They're not even going to see Modi. And they have been wailing at the top of their lungs for the last several days about how terrible this invitation to Modi is. And has anybody listened? Has Mark Carney done anything different? Absolutely not. And of course, you add to that the political failure of the New Democratic Party under Jagmeet Singh to make any impact in the last election.
Absolutely.
The Khalistani wing of the Sikh diaspora in Canada is not having a good year. I think their influence has been declining and may continue to decline under Mark Carney, who is no Justin Trudeau. He's not going to be...
He's no Justin Trudeau. I'm going to leave it there, sir. Thank you so much for joining us, both of you gentlemen, for speaking to us as NDTV continues to track Prime Minister Modi's visit to Canada to be part of the G7 summit. We're going to keep giving you details and updates on that and how it will reshape the India-Canada relationship. But we're completely timed out on this edition. Thanks so much for watching. On the other side, news and updates will continue.